You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Business owners and entrepreneurs struggling with your day-to-day tasks. What are you giving up by not automating your processes? With us today is Mark Bartel from Blue Ocean Automators. He is the founder and wants to give us some insight into how his company works, the process, and time that it can save you in your day-to-day life. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us more about your entrepreneurial journey. Were you in some sort of technology or automation related space before this? Or how did that even start with your journey?
Great question. I started out undergrad. I studied bioengineering. And like many aspiring college students, I was trying to become a doctor. So I did bioengineering specifically because I thought in case I want to walk away from pre-med someday, this gives me a nice way to hedge my bets and still do the engineering that I came to really appreciate, at least the math and physics when I was in high school. So 4 years of that, I then went to grad school after ditching the pre-med life. And my first job out of school was for a big research and technology development company up in the New England area. And my job was really like an internal sales consultancy role. And I would basically go to all these sales teams and I would basically tell them how to properly sell based on personality, based on the technology, all these types of things. And a lot of these guys were veteran sales teams. They'd been doing their craft since this particular client specifically, they'd been in their craft for the last 15, 20 years. Like since I was in elementary school, they'd been selling the same people year over year. So the more welcoming teams were like, oh, hey, good to have you. Let's see what you can do. The more cynical teams would either just straight up ignore my touch points, or they would even ask like, what can we learn from someone like you who just got out of school? And I very quickly found that their data was highly disorganized. Their processes internally for their teams were not optimized at all. So I went in and said, hey, I'm a whiz at Excel. I can plug a lot of stuff together. So I would build automations for them. And that very quickly gained me their respect. Like it went from being that outsider, just trying to look in and provide some kind of value, to being a very core member of their team that they allowed to make business decisions with and all that types of stuff. So during COVID, I started looking at my peers outside of my industry and seeing them get all these regulations put upon them by COVID. They had to furlough employees. They couldn't take as many customers. Those brick and mortars couldn't, they had to change their hours, all that types of stuff. So I remember one of my close friends told me, yeah, I've been running this business for the last couple of years and I may very well have to close it pretty soon if things don't change. And this was in Florida, like even Florida, who opened up relatively early compared to the rest of the United States. So I started thinking I build automations. What can I do to help these people? So I started out with just a couple small projects, building chatbots and DM automations and those fun things. Did a couple really cool case studies and it kind of just snowballed from there. I think my very first project that actually had people's backing and interest, and these are the goals and this is what we're trying to accomplish over the long term versus just really quick one-offs. That was in the summer, I think July, August-ish of 2020. And that project lasted 3 or 4 months. I realized, oh, there's a business model here. Let's do something with this. So I handed my resignation to my boss. He was super supportive. He's been super supportive ever since, and we still talk to each other to this day about life and what I've learned and all those types of things. But I went full time with it in April of 2021. And over the last year or two specifically, I've gradually moved away from chatbots exclusively and gone more so into utilizing all these different types of automations to give as many business owners as possible their time back. And, chatbots are great. I had a lot of fun building them. They're very lucrative to build, but the companies that can leverage them have to have a very specific list of things in place, assets, and resources, and all those types of things. So I thought if my goal is to help entrepreneurs get their time back and give them access to these tools that they might otherwise not realize they could be leveraging, it would greatly behoove me to find something that I can use to serve more entrepreneurs with. So I started looking more explicitly into ChatGPT and just backend automations as a whole. And that's been phenomenal. So I've been doing that specifically for the last, I think, 12 to 15 months. And yeah, I love what I do. I'm thankful for the people I get to work with. And it's been great.
Man, what an incredible journey. And kudos to you for knowing when to pivot. And you realize, okay, what am I really trying to help entrepreneurs with? You realized your current service offerings weren't exactly meeting those needs, or it was a bit more specific as far as the tangible benefits that every company could benefit from. And you took that to the next level and said, okay, what else can I learn or integrate into these businesses that are actually going to save them time, which is,
Mhm.
again, for entrepreneurs, that's what we're looking for. We need to save time. We need to scale. We
Mhm.
need help with those things. So everyone needs your help. Are there industries that you work best with, or you fell into one and suddenly you're getting more referrals for this one? You're like, I really like this sort of
Mhm.
industry.
Yeah, I'd say the industry is less like whether I decide whether I can work with someone or not, has more to do with where their company is on their journey rather than their industry. Like, yes, there's a couple industries that I target a bit more aggressively based off the turnaround, the ROI, and digital marketing agencies and real estate. Like those two industries specifically have done pretty well with automations, but the conversations as to whether I can work with someone often dictate like, are you just starting out and you have a growth mindset, or are you at that place where you can scale and you're being held back by all the admins and the to-dos that you're working on? So I had a client a couple weeks ago, and this was another engineering firm. And the nice thing about other engineering firms is they're either totally sold on what I'm doing, or they think it's the greatest waste of time ever. Oh, we can do that internally. We don't need you. 2-minute call. Thank you for playing. Have a nice day. But for the ones who recognize, hey, these are useful skills and these are processes that we could use. Like one guy asked me on the call, like, when can you best come into a company? And I said, quite frankly, the sooner the better, because the biggest problem a lot of companies have is once you have so much momentum for an initiative where you've got all this data on one particular tool, back automating it and applying stuff retroactively almost becomes more trouble than it's worth. So, I tell people ideally the best time to start automating is before you need automations because then it can scale with you. And I've seen a lot of companies do that really well, but you have to have people on the team that recognize the value in that. In this instance, this woman piped up and said, yeah, absolutely. I worked for a big technology organization about 10 years ago, and we'd been trying to automate their stuff. We'd been pushing for automations for a couple years. And when we finally got the green light, we realized we should have done this 5 years ago. And it could never quite reach its full capacity because of how much clutter and disorganization there was on the back end and transferring data and all that types of stuff. So the best place to pick a place that you're not growth minded, the best place to do it is when you're at that peak where you're starting to realize that you could be scaling aggressively, but there are too many people that have to touch every contract you do, every deal, every project, all that stuff. That's basically bottlenecking how many clients you can serve and how much value you can provide. If you're at that point where you realize, okay, this is about to get really aggressive on my schedule, that's the best time to start automating, if not at the very beginning.
Absolutely. And for business owners and companies to recognize that once they reach that peak within their workflow of what they're doing, that's exactly the right time. Because I feel like they've tested out and trialed all of their internal processes. They probably have things together and have an understanding of how that workflow operates. And then you can
Mhm.
come in and get that bird's eye view of their process and find out which key pieces of technology you can integrate at what point just to make
Mhm.
that workflow a lot easier. And you mentioned there was a woman who had worked with a technology company 10 years back, which would put that just on average, maybe 2010, 2014, and
Mhm.
how much the landscape of technology has changed since then. Was
Mhm.
she a big influence into the key pieces of technology you integrated? Or has technology changed so much in the last 10 years that what she had to offer just wasn't as relevant and said, hey, there's newer and better tools out there that we can use?
Mhm. So this one in particular, she was on a client call. She was one of the key stakeholders in this particular project that we were doing, and we were finalizing what the details would look like and what things could be automated. And one of our other team members just simply asked me in the closing process, are we able to do this right now? Or should we contact you in 90 days or something of the sort? And I said, no, we should start this right now. And here's why. And then she came in and said, yeah, I agree. And here's my experiences as to why he's right. Here's why we should start right now and not in 90 days.
That's incredible to have that backing from another key team member there
Mhm.
to get that process moving. That's incredible.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
what can you tell me about a fun project you worked on for the automation piece? Something that really helped people out, either quantifiable in the numbers with the use case that you have, or
Mhm.
it was just such a simple task for you to complete, but it saved the company tons of time and just improved all their processes all around.
Mhm. I'd say the most enjoyable ones. So whenever I work with a company, I start out by automating 4 or 5 tasks. There's client feedback acquisition, there's client onboarding, employee onboarding, a little bit of lead gen, though I myself do not do ads or anything of the sort. There's contract and there's invoice creation. So specifically those last two, most people will burn so much time and energy crafting contracts. And usually it's the same contract with a couple revisions. So I build this system. And one of the tools I like to use is Airtable specifically. So you have, 5 or 6 columns. It's like one of those triage charts. And you click something, say a customer from open to closed or something, or just purchased. And the automation is designed to, granted, you have to have some fail safes in there, but it's designed to, once part of the deal process has been done, it automatically generates a contract. It pulls all the details from the CRM, puts it on the contract, the price point, the product, any notes that you might have, they're specific for that contract. And then it sends it right to them, and they can either auto sign it themselves and never have to look at it, or they can then go and review it, sign it themselves, and then move on. But that's been a pretty simple one that doesn't take too long to automate, that most people, when they see it, they're like, oh my God, I had no idea that this could be automated. This saves us so much time. So I'd say that's one. And then the second project, this is more like a category of projects, I think. And there's a whole conversation we could have about this. And that is seeing VA's responses when they realize that they can work much more effectively with AI and not that they're going to have their job taken by it. So a lot of projects that I do, like in the past, I've had 1 or 2 projects that just got completely stonewalled by VAs. Everything looked fine. The contract was sent, the proposal was drafted, and then I hear nothing back from the client. I finally call them like weeks later. I'm like, yeah, my VA doesn't want to do this, and I don't want to steamroll them. It's like, well, oh, okay, I guess, cool. But those projects where the VAs are eager enough to learn it to make their own processes better. Like for a lot of this stuff, you're still going to need human beings engaging with it. But when you've taken away all the tedious parts of that job, they can scale your company. They can work a lot more efficiently, a lot more effectively. I don't think we're at the place yet, and you could debate if we'll ever get there, where you never need any human involvement at all. But if you view automations and AI as something to augment the human capital you've already placed in your business, as instead of just completely replacing it, then you're going to get the best of both worlds. Your employees will be much more efficient. They'll be doing work that actually asks a bit more of them intellectually. So it's going to be a bit more stimulating, but also they're just not going to be doing tedious stuff. Like, do you really want to send one email to 50 people with slight changes, or would you like to have those changes get auto detected and then send out those 50 emails and it's all done in 15 seconds?
There's a no-brainer answer, and I'm going to choose the second one, of course. And I hope many other
Absolutely.
business owners would too.
Mhm.
But there are struggles trying to communicate the effectiveness to the other team members. And when it
Mhm.
comes to AI replacing jobs or making them more efficient, and how does that look like going forward, there is going to be a shakeup within the employment world, within virtual assistants in any position. For us, we like to tell people it's more about reassigning them to more high value tasks. And I agree with you where, you automate some of the mundane admin tasks. Why are you putting effort there when you can then reassign that person to a much more important task to allow you to
Mhm.
scale? And at the end of the day, where do you see AI and automation technology in the years to come? We saw ChatGPT released a few years back, and just the extent of the new technology that came out from it. Do you see things changing even more in the next few years?
I think so. I mean, depending on the industry, it depends on how those changes are going to respond. And you can see it's very fascinating to watch different industries and how they're philosophically aligned respond to these things. Like, I've done campaigns with lawyers and legal professionals, and within AI specifically, that one's a bit more challenging just because of the very nature of law is, I mean, if you're driving in a car, to complete this metaphor, lawyers are often looking backwards at precedents that were set and established in previous court cases. So they'll say, based on what happened back there, this is how we should act right now. So for clients like that, they're a lot more skeptical of what AI can do, whether it's going to be useful. And there was 1 or 2 lawyers, I think, that I spoke, and this was a story that kind of circled the industry, where this one lawyer tried to use ChatGPT to construct a brief for one of his court cases, and ChatGPT just straight up made stuff up. And it cited court cases that never happened, and this guy got blamed by everybody because he didn't proofread his work. So a lot of lawyers came to me and said, oh, this is why we shouldn't use AI. And it's like, well, that's why you should proofread your work. That's not why you shouldn't use AI. So you have instances like that. You have teachers who are playing this perpetual cat and mouse game with students. I think there was a Stanford student, if I recall correctly. He invented this tool that would assess the likelihood of something, a paper, for example, being written by ChatGPT. And the two categories that he used to assess the likelihood was sentence structure and word variability. And to be fair, that's a pretty decent assessment right out of the gate, especially because if you use, for all the people in the audience who use ChatGPT extensively, the more you use it, the more you can kind of subconsciously tell when something was written by ChatGPT. Like if you go to a YouTube comment section, every once in a while someone will say, okay, ChatGPT, It's like, yeah, it's fair because just looking at the way the wording is, how the adjectives they choose to use, all that types of stuff. And there's a whole art and science to getting ChatGPT to speak like you, like your brand, which is an entirely separate conversation. But yeah, I mean, students who know how to use this stuff will always figure out how way to be one step ahead of those types of things. So you have the lawyers who are naturally skittish of it all, the teachers who don't want to use it. There's one professor from, I think, Wharton, his name is Ethan. I believe Ethan Bullock, I think, but don't quote me on that one. But he did a whole blog post on how he's leveraging ChatGPT in the class. It's really fascinating to watch the journey through there. But yeah, it's obviously going to continue changing. And the AI space in particular changes so fast. Even when I teach courses on AI, like I'll do a 6-week course, start to finish. By the third week, like new stuff has developed that forces me to modify the next 3 weeks of teachings before the course is done. So yeah, it's going to keep changing. And I guess the question of the debate is going to be, how is that going to change the economy? Because a lot of people have talked about UBI now and whether that should be worth looking into. I think the most surprising outcome that I did not expect, I don't think a lot of people did, was AI is replacing white collar work before it replaces blue collar work. Like people always assumed learn to code. I can't tell you how many times I heard that one growing up, but now you have these devices that can write copy. They can write passable code and they're only going to get better from there. You have all these, again, white collar professions now having to compete with AI or at least start leveraging them properly in a way to continue making themselves competitive. And the blue collar work, the plumbers, the carpenters, the designers, all those guys, they're pretty untouchable right now. At least the AI that's taken white collar by storm has not yet reached their industry. So that's sociologically going to be very interesting. And the next, I think that alone is the most fascinating thing to keep an eye on because we've had tons and tons of kids you just get pushed into college and they've kind of bypassed the trades and they've completely ignored them because they were seen as less than or whatever. And fine, whatever. But now you have a complete reversal of this. Like a college degree is almost, in terms of numbers and standing apart, everybody has one. So it doesn't really help you stand out that much. But if you can fix a house, which is always going to be in demand, if you can fix plumbing, fix carpentry, whatever, and there's not a lot of people that can do that, I mean, you can charge whatever you want. You know, you are now the new upper class. So I'd be curious to see if you're going to see like a revival of the trades industry again, either because it pays well or because it's a lot more secure than white collar work and knowledge based work and all that types of stuff. And I'm not even going to try to guess what that's going to look like, but it's definitely going to disrupt a lot of stuff and it's going to shake up a lot of otherwise stable foundations.
I appreciate your insight here, and it will be interesting to see how technology and employment and society as a whole is changed as we go forward with the new advances in technology and automation. Now, what's in the future for Blue Ocean Automators? What are your 2024 goals and beyond?
Oh man, I would say my goals for 2024 specifically by the end of the year, I want to master the process of delegating teams and AI to work much more effectively internally as well as for our clients. Now, in previous years, this wasn't as big of an issue, but because one, people are asking a lot more about it, it's the instant reason that I should be able to articulate how the two can work together. But also, the first year of business was really just figuring out what exactly I was doing. The second year was, okay, now we're making good progress. We're making good clients and all that types of stuff. And now the third, fourth years are going to be, okay, we know what we're doing now. We know what value we provide. Now let's start scaling this stuff and making it as efficient in terms of what we do for our clients, but also internally as possible. So yeah, I think that's my
Nice.
biggest goal for 2024, how to optimize, scale aggressively and be of more value to businesses.
Very exciting. Now, since you've been in the game for a few years already and you're just kind of like polishing up and putting these finishing piece touches on so that you can then scale and automate a bit more, how is your pricing strategy structured? Is it based on your time, the tools you're bringing in? Is it value based where you're explaining you're going to save X amount of hours per week and based
Mhm.
on the average number of humans it would take, this is what we're saving you, so we're going to charge you a percentage of that? What's
Mhm.
been working for you in that space?
I'd say what we've begun doing over the last couple months, and when I first started out, it was a per hour charge, and that's hard to scale. It also creates a mindset of like your income is directly tied to your time, which makes it psychologically harder to scale further on down the line. What we've started doing is like for the chatbots, when I was doing those, it was fairly easy to quantify those because we could tag whatever sales were made through the chatbot. Say, okay, we helped you close 50 grand in ecom sales. We would like to take 5 grand of that, 10 grand, whatever on a monthly basis. That was fine. Or more ubiquitous instances where we're saving more time and focusing less on bringing in revenue. I mean, there are ways to optimize and automate the revenue generating process, which is a different conversation. But for a lot of them, we'll go in and we'll say, okay, let's do a complete audit of your business. How many hours is your team spending on this tasks every month? Okay, so we're going to put all the stuff in place and we can expect that you'll save 60 to 70% of that time that you had 50 people working on this task or whatever. Now, if we want to go in the quantitative direction, we can based off salaries and all that types of stuff. But we found there's generally, and we're still kind of testing out, I guess, what the market response to the pricing is, because we found, as of right now, I've not yet found the upper limit for my pricing model. Like I can usually throw down a number and people are like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Great. I planned all these objection handling and I was prepared for a long and drawn out conversation, but most people just accept whatever price I throw at them and we move on from there. Now, granted, there's a whole psychology of are they internalizing, are they going to push back on the deal, whatever. But I've been surprised how few direct objections I get to my pricing. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, it does. And it's very insightful. And I know a lot of other entrepreneurs are going to take a look at their own pricing structure and reevaluate kind of how they approach the price value proposition and overcoming objections. That's going to be huge. For other entrepreneurs who are listening, what is one piece of advice that you would share with them, whether they're starting up or just at that point where they may need your services? What would be your advice to them? Anything that you can share, whether it's a podcast, YouTube channel, books, a mentor you've been following?
Oh man, there's a tons of different directions I suppose I could go on this. I think one of the most consistently valuable podcasts that I've listened to in my journey in terms of creating the right mindset, building the right habits, and doing a little bit of sales and marketing and stuff has been Valuetainment with Patrick Bet-David. I know as of late, within the last 6 to 12 months, they've started doing a lot more, I guess, podcast content where they're just talking about politics and the state of the world and the state of the economy. And that's not as explicitly useful for building a business as his stuff was in the last anywhere from 4 to 8 years. So if you look at his content from, I'd say 2014 to 2020, that's all, solid gold. Can't go wrong with just about anything that he says there. In terms of books, I think the biggest lesson I've learned would be very careful the types of content that you consume and the advice that you take and from whom that advice is coming from. And I think one thing I've had to learn over the years is once I can ascertain the mindset of the person giving me that advice, I can much more readily decide if this is something I want to take or not. And I guess a couple examples I can give. When I was first starting up my company, oh man, I think this was halfway through COVID. And, I had a pretty good paying job in New York City. I had a nice apartment, all that stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, I need to do this. I do believe that I need to take a stab at this, but I'm not sure tactically what that should look like. So I'd ask a lot of people, what do you think I should do? And I asked so many people about it, close friends, mentors, family. I got really good at predicting people's answers based on their economic status. Like a lot of my friends from university and a lot of my friends abroad, they're of the immigrant mindset. And they said, oh, just be happy you have a job, wait for COVID to die down at the very least. But like a lot of my classmates, they were here for grad school, they were international, and they got really nice jobs. We're talking Deloitte, MBB, the big tech companies, they're getting fired and having to either find a new job or go back home in 60 days. So their mindset was just be glad you have something, weather out this economic storm that we're all in, and then think about it in a couple years when things are going better. All the American friends that I knew that had green cards and passports, they said, no, go for it. No time like the present, make it happen. I've known you for this many years. I'm never going to do cool stuff. Just go get it. Don't take no for an answer. So by the time I decided to make the jump, I got much better at, I guess, more carefully crafting who I asked about that, it's like, okay, you came from, I don't know, let's say India. You're working in America. You have a nice shiny degree. You're working as a consultant. You're probably not going to tell me to quit. So I'm just going to let you do your thing and then I will go do my thing. And of course, I still up with them, but I just no longer ask them about that particular part of my life. And even that, I think that lesson has been more valuable than anything else. I guess this will be the second example. I did a book challenge in 2023, and the goal is read as many finance books as you can in a 12-month period. And I think I ended up reading like 18 or so before I could not stare at one more dollar sign. But again, I got really good at just assessing based off the title, based off the cover, what kind of mindset is this book catering to? Are we talking about like the Dave Ramsey crowd who shuns all form of debt and believes that the only way to live is to pay everything in cash? Are we talking about the Kiyosaki people of the world who are a lot more inclined to leverage debt to various degrees of success? Are we talking about I'm not going to say that, it's a little more political. Are we talking about, I guess, lower class books that talk about like credit loans and all these types of things that even the big banks tend to ignore because of their high risks and all that types of stuff? So figuring out, I guess, what kind of books the audience was catered to and whether, again, that was advice that I thought would be useful for me was, I think, another facet of one of the most important lessons I've ever learned. And at this point, I've gotten much better at looking at the author, looking at the message that is being at least articulated on the cover and deciding, okay, is this something I'd like to learn a bit more about and going from there. So yeah, to summarize one of those stories, be very careful what you read. Stay off TikTok if you can. Be very careful of who you take advice from and find good mentors. I'd say those 3 or 4 things have shaped me tremendously. And if I had to go back to 4 years ago, that's exactly what I tell my younger self.
That's fantastic. And I had some flashbacks when you were mentioning the accounting books having 18. And I'm just sitting here thinking, oh, wow, he's probably waking up from a nightmare thinking debits, credits, debits, credits. And you're like, I just can't do this anymore. One more dollar sign and that's it. Now, for those who are interested in learning more about you, connecting with you or your business, where can they go to find out more?
So I have my LinkedIn. I have my sales team manages my LinkedIn. So that's probably like, I'll connect with you, but I probably won't hear from you on LinkedIn. I have my email's probably the best way to get in contact with me. And that is mark.bartel@blueoceanautomators.com.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, the insight into what's been helpful along your journey. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Congratulations on all your success and the future success that you'll be reigning in the future.
And pleasure, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.